Hi everybody, Patrick here from EngineeringShop.com, ElectronicLessons.com, and PaintballProps.com. Today we're going to put together an ICU-Duino Arduino shield up on Kickstarter right now, link below. This is the printed circuit board, an 8-pin dip socket, 8-pin programmed microcontroller, VS1838B infrared receiver, various headers, 2-pin header jumper, a 0.1 microfarad ceramic capacitor, a 3mm red LED, a PIR passive infrared motion detector module, a momentary push button, and 5 resistors: 470 ohm, 100k ohm, 1k ohm, 100 ohm, and 20k ohm. So if you can't read resistor color code, you'll need a multimeter to determine which one is which. In any case, let's start with soldering the resistors to the board. Again, if you can't read resistor color code, you'll need your multimeter to determine which value is what. R4 is 470 ohms, so solder your 470 ohm resistor in that spot. One note about R1, it's labeled 1K. You actually want to place your single 100K ohm resistor in this slot. I've been I made a last minute design change, so ignore the indicator for 1K on R1. Make sure that you place your single 100K ohm resistor in the R1 slot. R4 is labeled 1K. Place your single 1K ohm resistor in the R4 slot. R3 is labeled 100R, so place your single 100 ohm resistor in the R3 slot. And lastly, R2 is labeled R2 20K. Place your single 20K resistor in the R2 slot. And once we're done that, we're actually going to do all of the headers. This is a fun step. I enjoy this step. What I do typically, and you don't have to do it this way, but what I like to do is to take two 8-pin headers, a 6-pin header, and a 10-pin header, and I like to place them into my Arduino Uno with the long ends in the holes. And so I'm just going to skip ahead for a second. So now we have a guide. We can place the inner pins into the pinholes. Fits in nicely. Now what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to solder the outer pins and inner pins only at this point. The outer pins and the inner pins. You don't want to solder all of the pins while sitting in the Arduino Uno because you don't want to melt the plastic on the female pin headers. So just use that. Just solder the inner and outer pins and then take it out and solder the rest of the pins. So I've got the inner pins all soldered. Make sure that when you do it you have no shorts. Next, what we're going to want to do is place another 10-pin header with the long pins facing up on the ICU-Duino. Another 8-pin here. Sorry about this. The second last 8-pin and the last 6-pin. There you go. Now the trick here is to do obviously one at a time. You wouldn't put them all in and then solder them because they won't stay in place. And as you can see, they're wobbly. So what I would do is do one at a time. And I would use my fingernail to keep the header at 90 degrees, straight up, solder one pin on the bottom, then turn to hold it in place, make sure that it's still standing straight up, and then solder the rest of the pins. And I would do that for all 4 headers. What I would do first is take the socket and place it into the PIC 10 slot right here. Now what you'll notice, hopefully you can see this, I know it's a little bit blurry, is on the bottom of the footprint there's a little notch right above the PIC 10 indicator. On the socket there is a notch on the left hand side from this perspective. So I'm going to place that notch into the hole with the notch facing the bottom of the board from this perspective. Hold it down with your finger, solder one of the pins, and then that should hold it in place. Make sure that it's flush to the board. Make sure there are no shorts when you solder it into place. Next, we'll take our 3-pin header, place it here in the program slot, and we'll take our 4-pin header and solder it into our input-output slot. Using the same trick as before, hold it down with your thumbnail, solder one pin, turn it around, solder the rest of the pins. Once you're done that, we're going to place our microcontroller into the socket, our 2-pin header onto the program jumper, and we're going to solder our button. The microcontroller has a notch on one side as well. In this case I have the notch on the right hand side. From this perspective, the notch on the socket is on the right hand side. So when you place the microcontroller in, you want to make sure that the notches are lining up with the notch on the footprint. In this case, to the right of the board. Pop your microcontroller in. Next, take your 2-pin header jumper and place it on the program jumper for safekeeping. We will select our modes with that, and we'll talk about that in the video manual. You don't want to lose that. Your button should go in the cell slot right here. It should pop into place. When you solder it, hold it down with one finger just to ensure that it's flush against the board when you solder it down. Next we'll do our capacitor, our diode, and our infrared receiver. The LED has a short pin and a long pin. The long pin is the positive anode, and the short pin is your negative cathode. It goes into the L1 slot. Make sure that when you solder the LED into the L1 slot that the short pin is facing the right of the board from this perspective, and the long lead is facing the button, the left side of the board from this perspective. If you reverse the LED polarity, you won't damage the board, but your LED won't work. Pay close attention to that. Your VS1838B goes into the IR slot right here. You want to make sure that the window on the front of the sensor faces the right side of the board. On the footprint there's a little window indicator. If you reverse it, you will fry your infrared receiver, and it obviously won't work. Your 0.1 microfarad ceramic capacitor goes in the C1 slot. It's not polarized, so it doesn't matter. Both pins are the same equal length. Pop it in there, make sure there's no shorts. Now here's a component I forgot to talk about in the introduction, and I apologize for that. It is a 100 microfarad electrolytic capacitor, and there is a long lead and a short lead. On the board, the footprint right here, it's labeled 100U C2. You want to make sure that your long pin faces the bottom and your short pin faces the top. Now the reason for this, there's a little positive sign right above the bottom hole. That is where you're going to place your long lead. That is your positive input. If you turn this around, you'll blow up your capacitor when you insert the board into your Arduino and power it up via the USB cable. As well, this capacitor is used for the infrared receiver. So if you blow that cap, your infrared receiver is not going to work well. So make sure that you solder that correctly. Long lead in the bottom, short lead facing the top of the board. Sorry guys, I made another herpy-derp. Before we get onto the PIR sensor, we have a 1-pin header. I forgot to include that as well. Rest assured you will receive all of this hardware in your kit. I just neglected to talk about this little header. So what you want to do is place it in the LED slot so we can access our indicator LED. You're going to have to use your nail to hold that down and solder the pin from the other side. This one's a little bit more difficult. You might want to, you might have your own way of going about this. I use my nail, turn it around, and solder the pin into place. But you want to make sure that it's facing straight up, not bent. So solder that into place, and next we'll do our PIR sensor. The PIR sensor module has 3 pins, and your PIR attach connector is right here. So what you want to do is place your PIR sensor in. Make sure that it's level, and you're going to want to hold it down and again solder 1 pin on the bottom, all while making sure that it's level. Solder 1 pin, ensure that it's level, then solder the last 2 pins. Then you can cut the remainder of the pins off at the bottom. That's recommended so that no shorts are caused later on. The last thing you want to do is make sure that all of your pins on the bottom are straight, and then we're going to take our ICU-Duino, line up the bottom pins, and pop! There we go. There's your ICU-Duino, ready to be plugged in. The video manual will be available in a little while, but this video just serves to show you how to put it together. Thanks for watching, and have a great day, guys.